I know why you're here. It's Saturday, 9 a.m., a little after. You know what happens that day. We're having people over. We're going to have a good time. I've got Shelly on today, and I bet you already know that. There's already a lot of you out here ready to hang out and talk with us. So let's go ahead and bring her over. Good morning, Shelly. I'm so glad to have you here finally.
Right. Good morning. Hi, everyone. I made it. I'm actually awake. I mean, sort of. I woke up about 15, no, I guess 20 minutes ago.
I got up around 6 o'clock our time to get Shander out the door for work, and it snowed yesterday a whole bunch,
Ugh.
and the roads are still bad. So
Oh, gosh. That's no fun.
yeah, I laid back down for a few since we were starting a little late. So many people here already. Good
I
morning, everybody.
know. Awesome.
Uncle Big Guy's here. Mama Bear Lynette's here. Lynn 22Q Cat is here. Sharon Holloway is here. Oh my goodness, L Strange. So many amazing people
Oh,
are already here hanging out, ready to hear
yeah.
your story.
Oh, I know. Right.
That
It's
Hungry
so.
Heath guy's here.
Oh, who's that? I heard he's really good looking.
Well,
Maybe I'll
like,
flirt with him later.
yeah.
I mean, he doesn't have a
So I was
beard,
really, I really, I mean, that is a deciding factor for me.
but
But I wanted to bring you here because I've seen you live a bunch. You guys cook every Friday night. You guys
Mhm.
have other kinds of content on your channel. You guys talk about Heath and his MS journey, and that's something that we'll talk about later this evening. But I wanted to talk about and focus on you. I wanted to hear your story because I've heard bits and pieces, but I've never got a chance to hear the whole thing. And we have all the
Oh,
time today that you can give to me.
oh wow. Well, yeah, it's kind of a crazy story. So actually, we just celebrated 5 years this week of being keto. So this is going back. Thank you. 5 years ago, y'all. So back in 2019, we were very fortunate to be on what's called a world cruise. Comment below if you've ever heard of those, especially if you've been on one. So basically, my father, or stepfather, he paid for our trip, but it was a lot of planning. Like you have to plan it a year in advance because you're basically supposed to be gone for like 3 months on a cruise. And so we were on the cruise, and it left out of Fort Lauderdale, and eventually, we were going across the Pacific over, down towards New Zealand and then Australia. And then we were supposed to go to Asia and all of that and eventually make it back to Florida. So, like around the world. Um, but on that trip, and we were not keto, we were very much YOLO people, right? We were just like, you know what? We're here for not a long time, but a good time. And so we've always been foodies. So we loved trying like good food, tried whatever was the local food. And so it didn't matter to us, what fats, calories, or any of that stuff, right? We were just like, if it's good food, we want to eat it. And, we ate all kinds of stuff all the time. And yeah, we were severely overweight. He was easily 500 pounds. I know I was up probably close to 400 at one point. So yeah, but to us, we were happy, right? We were just enjoying life and happy together and everything. So we left, and I guess about a little over 30 days into the cruise. So we had gone past Hawaii, and then we went to Tahiti, and then we think it probably happened around Tahiti. And then when we arrived in Auckland, New Zealand, I saw Lynette had asked what were my symptoms. Well, if you've ever been overweight, and I know that this happens to thinner people too, but I would get boils, right? You get boils, and you know how boils feel. They'll kind of swell and they're uncomfortable, and sometimes they'll be hot and then, you know, kind of disgusting, but you feel like you got to bust it, right? I guess technically you're supposed to go to a doctor, but I mean, who does that? And so, right. And so I felt like I had a boil right there, like in the bikini line. And I was like, okay, it's just a boil, right? Just nothing big. And when we got to Auckland, I just remember I was just not feeling well. Like besides the boil, it felt kind of like almost like a cold. Like I just felt real tired. I think I was probably having high temperatures and just didn't feel good. And the pain of the boil was so much worse than a regular boil might have just a little bit of pain, but this was just like excruciating. Like it was constant pain all the time. And I just was thinking, well, if I could just get rid of this, I'll be better. So we were in Auckland and we went to one of our things is we wanted to go to the top restaurants of the world. So we went to what was voted as, I think, number 10 restaurant in the world. It was so expensive. Like, I don't know what we were thinking. It was so expensive. And so, I mean, we saved up for over a year for this trip, right? Go to this restaurant. It was like $500, y'all. It was ridiculous. I barely remember that dinner, which is stupid for spending that kind of money. But I was really kind of going in and out. And I remember Heath a few times was like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And it just took everything I had to get through that meal because I was just feeling so miserable. And then we made it back to the ship. And that night, I was just like, I just something doesn't feel right. Went to bed the next morning, and like it was kind of disgusting, but the boil was leaking and it smelled putrid. I was like, that's not normal. So I was like, Heath, can you look at this? And because it was the bikini line and I was so fat, I couldn't see it. And so he looked and he's just like, he goes, well, he said it's black. I was like, oh my gosh. Well, I know what knowledge I have. I was like, it's not supposed to be black. And I was like, okay. So I went to the ship's infirmary and they looked at it and they were like, okay, we'll be right back. And I was like, okay. Because somebody else that we were on the ship with, he'd had a little thing on his finger and they just lanced it. And he went on, they gave him some antibiotics on the ship and everything. So I was thinking that's all they're going to do is lance it, give me some antibiotics, I'll be fine. Because, we were only like a third of the way through the cruise. And so I was just like, okay, just lance it. And they came back and they were like, I said, well, can't you just lance it so we can get on with our duties? And they were like, well, we're in contact with headquarters. I was like, oh, well, shoot, that's not good. And they basically, the doctor on the ship was like, look, you have necrotitis. Now I can't even remember the name. Necrophysitis, basically flesh-eating bacteria. And I was like, what the heck? And she was just like, yeah, it's bad. We got to get you off. You can't. And we had 2 days until the next port. And I was like, well, why can't I just stay till the next port? They were like, no, we don't think you would make it to the next port. We have to get you off. We're with headquarters. We're contacting Coast Guard. We're finding the closest port and everything so that we get you off in medical care right away because we can't wait. This is an emergency. And I was like, oh my gosh. And this ship, y'all, it's a small ship. So when you go on world cruises, it's not like the low carb cruise where there's thousands of people, right? It was less than 600 people on this ship. So you knew everybody at this point. After 30 days, you pretty much know everyone. It's like a little small town. And I was like, oh my gosh. So we're in the infirmary. We can't leave. Like, they won't even let me leave, right? Because they're just like, oh, put on hazmat suits. And so they went back and forth. They were either going to do a helicopter or they were going to do the boat. And so finally they decided, with the winds and everything, it was too much to do a helicopter. So they were going to do the boat. And we found this little town called Poverty Bay. And they came out and they said, okay, this is what's going to happen. And I said, okay, so Heath needs to go get everything packed. And they were like, well, Heath can't get off with you. And I was like, what? And I said, no, because it's the Coast Guard. They only have room for you and maybe one bag. That's it. So Heath is going to have to stay on the ship. We'll deal with him. And this is one of those things where I always recommend, if you're going on any trip, especially any trip over a few days, always get the insurance. Always get the insurance. It is so important, because you think, oh, I'm young and nothing's going to happen. You never know. And thankfully, we had bought the insurance, and it was really a lifesaver because they handled everything. Heath had his own contact that helped him with all of his stuff. I had my person, and then they're the ones who coordinated everything. So the Coast Guard comes, and they're like, okay, so normally they don't let anybody down in the area where you're going. They had to drop the plank, basically, a little board for, it's like a 5x5 area for then me to step, and then I was going to get to the boat. Normally they don't let anyone down in that area, but because of the situation, they did let Heath go with me. I guess they really must have, looking back, they must have thought this might be the last time Heath sees her. And so they let him, sorry.
Take your time, dear.
They let him go down, and, we said our goodbyes. It was really hard. And because they had to make announcements on the ship, and a lot of the people on the ship have done so many cruises, so they knew the code, right? And so they're all on the balconies looking down like, who's being, taken off the ship? And so a lot of our friends that we had made were like, oh my gosh, is that Shelly? So, and what was funny about this is you're thinking, oh, you just walk off the ship onto a boat. Oh no, we have to have, it's early. It's hard for me to think, but basically we're going to have challenges put in place. So the boat I'm on, we're in the ocean, right? And it's bobbing up and down. The Coast Guard is bobbing up and down. They're like, so one of the Coast Guards jumps on the plank with me, puts a life vest on me. And he's like, okay, what you're going to have to do is time this. So when the Coast Guard boat comes up, you're going to have to jump from this plank to that boat. He said, but don't worry, we've got your life vest, and my buddy over there, they're going to catch you. And I'm like, they're going to catch me? Like, I mean, come on. And so that was so nervous, because I don't even like getting on those things when you have to get on for a tender boat. That makes me nervous. But this, I didn't even have the little, usually when you tender, there's a connecting piece between the two boats. No, I had to literally jump over into that boat. And so that was like an experience. So jump into the boat, they catch me, thankfully. And, then we get there. Again, this is like a little bitty town. And whenever we get to the town, in fact, on the boat, they had to bring the boat back into, I guess, dry dock, because they don't use it that much, And then they had to get the boat all on land And then once it was fully on land set up, then they brought like stairs and I had to get down. It was just the weirdest thing to me. I've never owned boats, so I don't know if that's normal or what. So I got off the boat. They then had an ambulance waiting, went to the hospital, and I'm in the emergency room. Thankfully, I was able to bring a bag that had my laptop, my phone, and like a change of clothes, right? And my sleep machine, because I did have or do have sleep apnea. And I'm in the emergency room talking, and I mean, the care there was amazing. And I'm, they're like, okay, where the emergency room doctor's like, okay, I see this area. The surgeon, because this is like a teaching hospital, he's like, the surgeon's on his way in, and they rotate doctors from the country, right? They do their little stint. And he's like, I want to take a picture so the doctor could see what he's coming into. Do you mind if I do that and send it to him? I'm going to delete it right afterwards, but is that okay? Because, it's right there in the bikini line. I'm sure they got to see it all, right? And so I was like, well, do what you got to do. Like at this point, I'm just like, do what you got to do. And so he took the picture, he sent it, and then he showed me, he's like, and then I'm deleting it. See, here I go, delete. I'm like, okay. I just thought that was cute. So they were
okay,
talking.
so you're aware at this point because you guys were coming up on Auckland, New Zealand. So are you in a hospital in New Zealand now, or are you somewhere
Yes.
else?
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
sorry. Yeah. So now we're past Auckland, New Zealand. We are between Auckland and Dunedin. And it's this little town called Poverty Bay in New Zealand. So I'm in a New Zealand hospital, and so I'm in their emergency room right now. And so emergency room doctor shows me, and he's like, okay, the surgeon's on his way. We're prepping the theater. I love that. And I was like, okay. And I'm trying to correspond with Heath. He's like, I could tell he was having like such a hard time. And thankfully, we had friends on the ship. So he's still on the ship and he can't get off the ship until they arrive at Dunedin. So I'm alone here in New Zealand by myself. And not, that's it. That he's my only contact. So, but the staff there were really nice. So the nurse is like, okay, we're prepping. The surgeon comes in and he's just wearing like a shirt and shorts, right? Like he was just enjoying his day off until Shelly showed up. And so
How
he
rude.
I know, right? Like, he was like, this is the worst. So he's like looking, he's like, yeah, you have a flesh eating bacteria. So we got to go in there and try to cut this out. And, you have to cut more than what's already been infected because you don't want it to keep spreading. Because I found out with flesh eating bacteria, the survival rate is really low. About 66% of the people die from it.
Oof.
And yeah, it was like incredible. And because what happens with it, especially the longer you go, they said most people don't make it after 3. If you haven't got to a hospital within 3 days, you're probably dead. And because what happens is the flesh eating bacteria, it just is feasting on your insides. And if it hits like a major, artery, then it'll just go everywhere. And with it being right there in my groin, I mean, it's like prime real estate there. So they were working really fast, and he said, okay, we're getting it ready. And so I'm just envisioning, here in the US, whenever I've gone to the emergency room, it could be hours and hours before anything happens. And it's like an hour into this, and I'm like, okay, I'm telling my husband that you're getting the theater ready. How much longer do you think it's going to be? Because, trying to keep him up to date. And they're like, no, like we're going now. Like it's prepped now. And I was like, what? And they're like, yeah, it's now. So I go into the operating room. Of course, I put out. And the next thing I know, I'm in ICU. And it's late at night, I guess. I don't know. It's dark. And I just remember kind of coming in and out, which you do after surgery. And but I remember like lots of beeping and everything, and kind of, people like talking about, like this is going, that's failing, blah, blah, blah. And a doctor come in and he's like, I guess I was somewhat coherent. And he goes, hey, he said, look, I'm going to give you some Valium. And I was like, oh, and he's like, your organs are failing right now because you're going into shock. And he's like, so we're trying to prevent that. So I'm going to give you some Valium to kind of calm you down. And I was like, oh, am I dying? And he's like, well, we're going to try to prevent that. So you just hang in there and hopefully this will help. So that was like the first time that I was like, wow, I was really that close to dying. It had never hit me like that. And so I was just really like, this might be it. And I'm alone in a foreign country, without my husband. So thankfully, I woke up the next day, and which is good. It's always the first 24 hours. The care at the hospital was amazing. Everybody was so good. When they came to look at the wound, it was like a group of people, and they would look at it. And basically the size of the wound, because they did show me, I could have fit my cell phone into the wound. That's how big of a cut that they did. And so they, were given the treatment. And I remember it was day 2, I'm still in ICU, and a young doctor comes, and he's like, and I'd kind of known about keto. We'd kind of, I would say, dabbled in low carb. Like we were like, well, instead of potatoes, we'll have a sweet potato. Instead of white rice, we're having brown rice. That was our keto, right? Mm-hmm. Very, very, very high level, right? It was really low carb at the best. So a doctor come in. So I know kind of the basics. And he was like, okay. He's like, do you know why you got this flesh-eating bacteria? And I was like, no, I guess I'm unlucky. And he was like, well, your diabetes, we've run the numbers. You're way out of control on your diabetes. And I had known I was a diabetic. I just didn't do anything about it. Like the doctors had told me before, you need insulin. I was like, I am not injecting myself. Just not going to do it. I don't like needles. So I was just like, when they would give me this stuff, I threw it in the car and just didn't do it. And he was like, so your diabetes is way out of control. And he explained to me, he said, what happens when you're a diabetic, your body is so focused on fighting diabetes that if anything else comes in, and it could be something very basic like a cold or a flu, your body just doesn't have the resources to fight that off too. And that's generally what happens when you have diabetes, is that your body just can't. It's overwhelmed. It doesn't have enough to fight anything else. So a lot of people might actually get a flesh-eating bacteria, but if they're healthy, their body just flushes it out and it never even impacts them. But because your diabetes is so out of control, it couldn't, and it just flourished because there was nothing to fight it off. And I was like, oh, and he's like, so, and to me, this was the most powerful statement. And in the US, whenever I've gone to doctors, they're like, you're a diabetic. Here, I'm going to write you a prescription. That was it. That's all, oh, if you have diabetes, you just have to take a pill or take insulin. That's it. No other discussion, nothing about food. In fact, I remember when I'd go to the doctor with her, they would say, I would ask them, well, does she need to change her food or whatever? No, here, she just needs to do this insulin 2 or 3 times a day. She just needs to, check, and whenever her numbers spike, then this is what you do. And I was like, well, shouldn't she like cut back on this or that? No, she doesn't need to do that. So that's all I was ever told. So this doctor in New Zealand, the most powerful thing he said to me is he looked at me and he said, so what are you going to do about it? And I was like, wow. To me, that was so powerful because that's what it comes down to is what am I going to do about it? It doesn't matter what other doctors, what other people tell you this is what you should do. It's me. I'm the owner of this. I'm responsible for my health and deciding what am I going to do about it. And that rang so true because it was like, oh, so I could do something. I could change this. It's all within me to do this. So I was like, well, I know I need to cut out sugars. And he was like, he got so happy. He was like, yes, that's it. Great. And I was like, well, and he's like, what else? I said, well, and I guess, cut down on refined carbs. He's like, yeah, it's very good, very good. And he goes, what else can you do? And I said, well, I guess eat more leafy greens and healthy proteins. And he's like, yes, very good, very good. Yes, if you could do that, he said, you can really get that diabetes better. And I was like, okay. So I was like, all right. In the meantime, Heath is still on the ship, right? I'm already in the hospital ICU. So immediately I get out my laptop after talking to him, and it just was like, okay, Shelly, you could do this. So I, go into my YouTube, and I was just like, well, let's just try this. Reversing diabetes. That's what I put in there. And that's how I found Dr. Ken Berry. And he was talking about how diabetes can be reversible. And I was like, all my life, no one had ever said you can reverse diabetes. No doctor had ever suggested such a thing. No doctor had ever told my mother that could be done. Nothing has ever been said about that. And here is a doctor on YouTube saying you can reverse it. So I start binge watching all of his stuff. How do I do this? How I kind of know the basics, but how do I do this? So I'm binge watching. In the meantime, I'm telling he's getting coordinated. He gets off the ship in Dunedin, had to stay overnight because New Zealand's this very small country as it is. And a lot of these smaller towns, like Auckland's very metropolitan, but all these other towns, it's like the 50s, right? Like they don't have airplane, or the airport isn't open every day. Like they only have airplanes running 2 or 3 days a week, right? So he's in Dunedin. They put him up in a hotel for a night because the airport only ran certain days. So he couldn't catch a flight to where I was until the next day. So in the meantime, though, which is good in a way that, he's not there right now because I'm just nerding out. I'm like learning all this stuff. And immediately, when the hospital would bring me the menu to choose for the day, I was like, okay, well, for breakfast, one of the items they had was a plain yogurt. And I was like, okay, I'll just get a plain yogurt for breakfast and skip the cereals. So I'd have plain yogurt and, of course, coffee. You got to have that. And then for lunch, they would always have some type of green. They called it silver leaf, which I believe is like a turnip green. Somebody could correct me, but they called it silver leaf. So I would, pick the protein I wanted, and then I would do 2 times whatever the green vegetable was, and then cross out any of the starchy stuff and the dessert, right? And then the same thing for dinner. And then the only thing I kind of partaked in was afternoon tea because which was just basically they would, do you want what they called? Oh, I can't remember. Do you want your tea black or white? And I was like, well, what does that mean? So white is with cream. So I would have that. And usually they did serve it with like a little Biscoff, one of those little sugar type cookies. So I did have that a couple times, but I started making those changes. And I was like, okay, I really feel like we're going to give this a go. But I felt if I'm going to give this a go, I'm going to have to go full on into keto because I'm going to see if this doctor is right because I'm just skeptical, right? Especially you see somebody on YouTube that is like, oh yeah, you can reverse your diabetes. And I've never heard that from anyone else. I'm like, oh, can we? Well, we're going to see Dr. Barry. So I immediately am like, okay, I'm going to go full on and I'm going to give this a try for like 6 months and we'll just see. We'll just see if I actually reverse my diabetes. We'll see what happens. Right. But I'm like, but I know I have to give it my all to give it a good test. Right. So I'm all into it. I'm nerding out everything, right? I'm watching, and then I started finding like other channels. At the time, 5 years ago, it was like Dr. Berg, and Thomas DeLauer. Those were the big keto people 5 years ago. So I started, watching all their stuff. And that's kind of what I do. I kind of go overboard, right? So I go overboard. And when he finally shows up, he comes in and and we're excited and he's just like blown away that we're together again, right? And that I'm alive, because he had several breakdowns on the cruise ship. He was just miserable, right? So he's in there and I kind of knew, and Dustin, I'm telling you, Chandra knows too. When you can convince your man of something, you're like, okay, I've got him. No matter what I ask, I know he's going to agree to it. He has no choice.
Right.
So I knew this was my opportunity. So I was like, okay, so Heath is here. I know he'll agree to whatever I need him to.
Especially right now. Especially
Right.
going through all of this. He's putty right there,
Yeah, exactly. So I use that to my advantage. So I was like, okay, I'm doing something because my diabetes is so out of control, and we know you're a diabetic too. We got to do this together. I can't do it by myself. You're gonna have to join me. And he's like, okay. And I explained to him keto. I said, look, we're gonna have to, when we get home, we got to cut out all of the sugar stuff. All of it's got to go. We can't just wait and eat it till it's gone. Like, it has to be, soon as we get home, we got to clear that out. We can't just, we won't buy it again. No, like, you got to take it to the food banks. You got to give it to friends and family. Like, it needs to be out of the house. We got to do, get rid of all of the pastas and rice, because we love to cook. We've always been people who love to cook and create meals. And so we had all the stuff, right? And he was like, okay, all right, I could do that. And so he agreed to it, right? And I know he was just like, oh, and I was like, no more sodas. And he was just like, oh. So it wasn't his choice, right? But he, of course, agreed to it. So I'm in the hospital. I'm now in a regular room. And thankfully, they were really nice because, it is a teaching hospital, but they were able to get me a private room, which was nice because everybody else didn't have that. Apparently, they wrote about me in their local newspaper. They were like, American gets off ship to go seek medical treatment. I was just like, that was the big news for the town, right? So yeah, I was in the hospital, and every time, I was eating, they were constantly taking my glucose to see, and then determining how much insulin to give me. They were giving me insulin. So it turns out my A1C was 13.6. And so it was horrible, right? And I'm in the hospital. We're getting, of course, everything set up so we go home, getting all the flights. And in fact, we were in such a little town that the only international airport is Auckland. So they had to get us to Auckland. So to get us to Auckland, what they had to do was we had to take a taxi for almost 5 hours to this other town. And I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. And then from that little town, we were able to then take an airplane to Auckland. So it was a whole day event to get to Auckland. And then from Auckland International, back, and we had to lay over in LA and then finally home to Houston. So, yeah, it was quite the ordeal. But what was amazing there, and this is when I knew something was up, is by day 8 in the hospital, when they took my glucose, they were like, "Oh, your sugar's normal. We don't have to give you insulin." And I was like, wow, if after day 8, my blood sugars are normalized to the point I don't need insulin after I eat, I was like, that is obviously a sign that this keto thing I'm doing is working. So I knew then, okay, I'm going to stay on this path. And when I, even when we flew home, they serve a meal and you check what you want from the menu. I I got a burger and I took the bread off and I just ate, like, I was like 100% on board at that point. And we got home and I kept up that yogurt that I got at New Zealand. I wished I could find it here. It's probably just a local New Zealand brand. It only, for the whole container, only had one total carb. It was plain. It was so delicious. And again, I had that every single morning. So when I got home, I started doing the same thing. I was like, well, I want to have yogurt every day. So I had to, because of the wound, in New Zealand, I had a wound vac. So that's where, like, helps keep it all nice and how it's supposed to be. In the US, I couldn't get the insurance to approve a wound vac. So, yeah. So I had to have Heath change out my wound every day. So it was a wet wound. So you had to put, stuff on it. Anyway, y'all probably don't want to hear all the little messy details there. So I finally went to a surgeon here in Houston for my follow-up care. And I remember, going there and, he was explaining, well, because you're diabetic, it's probably going to take months for this to heal, blah, blah. Because, most people understand that diabetics are slow healers. And that's the thing. And a lot of people don't even want to do surgery if your diabetes is bad. In fact, a year before, we were in a really bad car wreck. That was part of the reason we could afford. But anyways, and in that, I had broken my arm that needed surgery. And my attorney had to find a surgeon who would do it because my diabetes was so bad. There was surgeons who just didn't even want to do it because they were like, oh, you're too much of a diabetic to do that surgery. So, yeah, so I knew that. So going in, I'm like, well, we'll see how this heals. So I'm keeping up by having the yogurt every single day and doing the keto. Like, we came home, we ended up having to purge the house 3 times to get everything out because we were like, oh, okay. Because as you learn, especially if you're new to keto, as you learn, you start learning all the other words for sugar, right? Like at first we're like, okay, this says sugar. And then later you're like, oh, maltodextrin's also sugar. Oh, this dextrose is sugar. Oh, this is sugar, right? So we're reading all the labels now, getting rid of that. And then I started getting rid of anything that had seed oils in it. I'm doing everything Dr. Berry said to do. He has so many videos where he's like, okay, do this, 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 and this. And I'm doing it. So we're getting rid of all of this food. And it just, it took us 3 times to get rid of everything. And I'm going to the surgeon. And what was fun about that is every week I'm going to the surgeon, like my weight is just dropping off, which was like, that wasn't even my goal. I just didn't want to be a diabetic anymore. And then seeing that happening. And then the surgeon was like looking at the wound every time. And he's like, wow, you are healing so well. Like, he was surprised. He's like, wow, this is just healing so well. He's like, yeah, it's looking so good. And was completely healed within 2 months. 2 months, all healed up. And he said that was for the wound and everything, that was a considered a quick heal. And I really think it's because of keto and eating all of that yogurt, having those healthy proteins. I was basically giving my body the building blocks it needed to repair that wound. And so my A1C again was 13.6. When I had it checked last, it was down to 5.4. So but it did take, like, Heath was able to reverse his within, I think, a couple months. Mine took about, I would say, close to 6 months before it was what I would call completely reversed. So it did take a little while, but from then on, it's been 5 years. I just keep at it, because to me, if I never become a diabetic again, that's the best win to me. If I might not ever lose all the weight, but if I'm just never a diabetic or have other health issues, then to me, that's a win.
100%. It's an amazing story. So you said that you started this obviously not for weight loss. And most of us come to the ketogenic lifestyle for weight loss. That's typically what gets our foot in the door. Some people go to carnivore. They'll skip keto, go straight to carnivore because of autoimmune things like that that we're seeing. We're seeing more and more things where IBS, Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, all these things. It's crazy, though, that it was almost serendipitous to the fact that this happened while you were where you were. It happened at a hospital that you were, and the doctors gave you that push that they gave to you. Because I've seen in the chat, I think Evelyn said it, and Matreus, mirrored it. Is if this would have happened in the States, they would have not given you the same advice. Just like the surgeon was looking at you saying, well, you're a diabetic, so you're not going to heal, instead of saying, well, here's how we can push this forward to make you heal. And New Zealand is kind of an interesting place, because when I started keto in 2016, there was a surgeon out of New Zealand. He was a orthopedic surgeon, I believe he was. And I'm trying to remember what his name was. I think it might have been Gary Fetke.
Yes, that's it.
And he got suspended and all because he was pushing a low carb diet to his people, so he wasn't cutting their toes off, cutting their feet off. And he was later vindicated. And, as other doctors have been, around the world, where same thing happened to Professor Noakes. Well, that was a little bit different. That was because of a tweet. But that was, Professor Noakes in South Africa. We're seeing that happen more and more, where doctors are going against the status quo, pushing non-pharmaceutical directives, or they're going against the pharmaceutical directives. Because if you understand, most doctors, that surgeon probably had no idea, and Houston had no idea that you could do something about diabetes, because most doctors in the United States get such a little bit of nutrition and their entire career of schooling. Their nutrition is usually about half a semester, if that. And even in that semester, it's probably more propaganda than it is, well, this is what we want. This is what, this is the, even South Park got it right. There's a video, and I, for those who may or may not watch South Park, but there's an episode where Cartman's calling the FDA, and the FDA is freaking out about, it's dinner time on the East Coast. What are we going to do? And Cartman calls up and goes, the food pyramid. He goes, we haven't used that since Michelle Obama was in office. It doesn't work. He's like, turn it upside down. I'm like, it works. It works. Yeah, I mean, even South Park gets it.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah. Well, and I think part of it is that young doctor who came to talk to me, and that kind of gives me hope because it was a training hospital. So if a younger doctor who is, doing his internship there, maybe there is hope that, the young doctors there in New Zealand were learning that information because he knew it. And so hopefully they, are continuing that. And yeah, it would have been a totally different story here. And I might not even be alive. And I looking back, right? Because of course at the time of 2019, we didn't know what was to come. But I really feel like if this hadn't have happened in the 2020 pandemic, I know without a doubt Heath and I would have passed. We were both bad diabetics. I did have ulcerative colitis as well. I was diagnosed with that, been treated multiple times in the hospital for ulcerative colitis. We were not healthy people and we ate, all the standard crap, right? And I just feel like probably in the pandemic, if we were not keto, I think we probably would have passed, at least one of us. I don't think we would have survived because we were like the target person for that. So I think, yeah, it's just looking back, you're like, wow, if it hadn't have happened in 2019, like our lives would be totally different today. If we hadn't have been in New Zealand and I got that push and then I forced Heath to do it, we wouldn't be where we're at today. And I'm glad that more and more people are speaking up and sharing their stories. Like it's great that there are doctors who are on board. And it's great that there are doctors that are giving a information out there because I know for some people they have to hear it from a doctor for them to make the change. Like me sharing my story, they're just gonna be like, "Yeah, that's just you. Who are you? Right? You're just some nobody." And they want to hear it from a doctor. But I think really the best and most effective is generally all of us sharing our stories, sharing how keto has changed our lives. And yes, whether that's weight loss that you went into it for, and then you're like, oh, but look, my eyesight's better now. Yeah, this other thing I had, the ulcerative colitis, is now I haven't had a ulcerative colitis flare up since I've been keto.
I have a friend of
Before,
mine. He's a very good friend. We've been friends for 20 years. He has UC, and I have been begging him. And I know that it's one of those things you can't force someone to do something they're not going to do.
mm-hmm,
But he's on Humira,
mm,
and he's got all these issues, and he's in pharmaceutical remission right now, right? And he's terrified to do anything that's going to cause those symptoms to come back because it took like a year and a half to get his symptoms under control. And I
mm-hmm.
understand that. At the same time, I'm like, the drug you're on is about as bad as having the symptoms in the first place. And
Yeah,
it's terrifying. And we've been friends forever. I don't want that for you. And I'm terrified for him. And he still does whatever he wants to do. And, like I've got family that are type 1 diabetics who do whatever they want to do. I've got friends that are type 1 diabetics who do whatever they want to do. I've got, and family members are popping up and taking those new wonder drugs now, the injectable weight loss shots, and they're
uh,
dropping weight and all that. But I'm terrified because they're typically older family members and they're probably losing so much lean body mass. And there's so
mm,
many terrifying things that we're supposed to be the greatest country in the world, but we get almost everything wrong on a daily basis. And I know that that sounds defeatist or whatever you want to call it, but I see that like, just the fact that you happen to have what you had happen to you probably in the best place that it could have happened.
yeah.
If it was going to happen, I don't know if there was a better place for it to happen than where it did. So I would say that you're extremely lucky, unfortunately, to have that happen, but have it happen where it did. So,
Mm-hmm.
and the
Yeah.
experience you had, I don't know. I wonder, and maybe you can ponder this a little bit for me, but if this would have happened in the States, and you survived, do you think you would have taken it the same way and made the changes that you did?
I seriously doubt it because I don't think anyone would have said it's because you're a diabetic. I think because like before my grandmother passed, I took care of my grandmother the last few years of her life. And I went to so many doctor's appointments, and she ended up passing from cancer. So I went to the oncologist, and and then my mother, I would help her go to her nephrologist for her diabetes and all of this stuff. No doctor that I ever saw, never once in any hospital, because they had multiple hospital stays, did anyone ever say, "Oh, you have this. This is how you treat it with food." It was the hospitals here, and just to like, I was pre-med in college, so that was my whole. I was going into medicine because I've always enjoyed helping people, and I was like, well, I'm going to go into medicine. I'm going to become a doctor and help people. Uh, but then I noticed back at the time, this is probably a little off topic, but I noticed, and I worked in a hospital years. Hospitals are a business, straight up. It's not in my envision when I was, in HOSA in high school and everything. It was, oh, we're doctors to help people. And then after working in a hospital and, doing all this stuff in college, it was like, no, a hospital and the medical center in the US is strictly a business. So it's just like if you're looking at banking, it's a business. That's how they look at it. That's how the administrators treat it. That's how the doctors and the staff, it's a business. It's a job for them. And that's what I noticed, that also when taking care of my grandmother and mother, if they had one symptom and they went into the hospital, they only treated that symptom. They didn't connect and say, oh, like for my mother, well, you're a diabetic. That's why you're having this happen to you. No, it was like, oh, okay, you have this. We're just going to treat this for now. Some of the other doctors treating your diabetes, we're not going to mess with that. We're only going to treat this, what you're here for today. So I'm sure if I went to a hospital with flesh-eating bacteria, that's all they would have treated. They wouldn't have said, well, it's because you're a diabetic. They would have said, oh, you're here for a flesh-eating bacteria. Let's get this out. Here you go. This is how you recover from it. There would have been no connection between that and diabetes, because that we don't take a holistic approach in the US.
We're a symptom based. So basically,
Yes.
we fight and treat each symptom as a separate, but we don't, like you said, we don't connect the dots. And one thing you did say is this community, and I've seen it mirrored in the chat as well. And I'm sorry I'm not putting up everybody's chats like normal, but there's just so much information here I think to cover. But with the way that our community is, and our community is so supportive, and we're saying, I see a lot of people saying, that even with the doctors like, Ken Berry and all the other doctors that are on board that are, I saw at KPL this last year where somebody was in the audience and they came up to speak and they said, I'm hearing all these testimonials and I see all of the things that everybody's doing, but it took the doctor reassuring me that that's the correct thing to do. So I think even with all of our fascinating stories, our truly emotional stories like yours, where, it's miraculous. We still have to kind of be backed up like by a Thomas DeLauer, even though he's not a doctor and he gets a little in the weeds, and maybe even like Rhonda Patrick or other, well, she's a doctor, but other people like, I think she has a PhD now, but I'm trying to think, Nina Teicholz.
Oh, yeah.
So many of these, so many people coming in, and Gary Taubes, even the non-doctors combining with the doctors, kind of help putting words out there where doctors may not be able to do that, because Ken Berry does what he does, but I don't think he even practices anymore.
Yeah.
So
right.
he used to have a practice because I found out about him through the Two Keto Dude podcast, and he came on and talked with them, and he was Carl's primary, his practitioner. So
Oh, wow.
Carl had to fly down to Nashville or wherever in Tennessee to see him in person once, and then they would do teleconferencing or whatever. So they do it over the
Wow.
computer. So that's how I kind of started finding out about Dr. Barry and even like Jason Fung, and all,
Oh, yeah.
he's a nephrologist and all that. So there was more sciencey stuff for me in the beginning than there was the testimonial things like now. So that's what I like now, is being able to have people like you with these amazing detailed stories, as well as some of the people that are pushing the limits on the, with the doctor side, and the ones holding the conferences and such like that. So
Well,
I'm
yeah, and I feel like you're right. And here in the US at least, and I think most of Western society put doctors up on a pedestal. And it's they're the number one resource. And that was a little bit different in New Zealand, because like the nurse that was, and probably Chandra could relate to this, the nurse that was taking care of me, when the doctor came in, they were like, "Hey, Steve, this is what's going on." And I was like, "Who's Steve?" And they're like, "Oh, well, he's the surgeon." I said, "You call him," oops, sorry, y'all. I was like, "You call him Steve?" And they were like, "That's his name." I was like, "You don't call him Doctor whatever?" They were like, "Oh, that's very pretentious." And I was like, "Oh." They were like, "No, we're a team here. We all work together. Like, your care isn't just the doctor, what he says. We all come together, and yeah, we work together." They don't call each other doctors or nurse or anything. They call each other by their name. And like when they would have meetings with me, it wasn't, because my experience here, and it might vary by your region, but like with my grandmother, one doctor would come in and he would say, "Okay, well, we're going to do this, this, and this." And then an hour later, a different doctor came in and said, "Oh, we're going to do this." And I'm like, "But the other doctor said this." And they're like, "Yeah, well, this is what we're going to, I want to do this instead." And so there was kind of like this battle. But in New Zealand, it was all of them came in and they weren't like, "Oh, I'm this doctor." They're like, "Okay, I'm the surgeon who did it. Okay, wound care, what is your perception here?" And it was, the doctors never gave orders. They discussed as a team, and the surgeon would be like, "Well, here's how it's looking. Okay, wound care, what do you think we should do next? How do you think things are working?" Like, he actually wanted their input. And then, the ICU nurse was like, "Oh, and this is what I've been noticing with things, da da da." And then, so they all had a discussion, and I was involved in the discussion. It wasn't them just talking around me and giving orders. Then they would be like, "Okay, so this is what we're thinking. What do you think? How are you feeling?" They involved me in the conversation. So it really was a more holistic approach there. And it wasn't just a one option thing. But and whereas here, it's like whatever the doctor says, oh, they're the God, basically. And so some people have it, and it might be more of an older generation, like my mom's generation. It wouldn't matter what I've told my mom. But if a doctor told her that, that's when she would believe, because she was brought up, whatever the doctor says is, he knows what's right, or she knows what's right because the doctor said it, and the doctor's the one who knows. So if her doctor's never going to tell her, "Oh, you need to cut out the sugars and the carbs," she's going to be like, "I know that worked for you, Shelly, but my doctor says I don't need to do that." So it's
and
like
that's the
we need
thing,
to.
like
Mhm.
taking doctors. So Shander being an RN, she tells me things and we have discussions. And even now she talks to me on her way home, and she tells me stories of her day. And the new
Oh.
position she has, I listen less because I can't retain the stories that she tells me. Otherwise, I'll be up all night. And some terrible things. But some of the things that I've learned as with her tenure as being a nurse, doctors here in the United States, first off, you have to remember that there was a point in time where doctors refused to just wash their hands,
Mhm.
because they're like, "Why do I need to wash my hands? I'm a doctor. Why should I have to wash my hands?"
Mhm.
And then they found out, well, washing your hands significantly cuts down on infections being spread to other people. So there's, the pretentiousness has been there, and it's deep rooted in the profession of being a doctor. Now it's it's the rule, not necessarily the exception. There's going to be good doctors. There's going to be, substandard doctors. I won't say bad doctors, but there probably are as well. But Chandra, as a nurse, a doctor will put an order in, and Chandra has to look at that order, and it's going to go through multiple people. So the order comes in, the nurse sees it, pharmacy sees it, and everybody has to go, okay, the doctor, we can't do what the doctor said, because if we do what the doctor said, it might have catastrophic effects. Doctor puts in whatever order they feel or whatever they think is correct. But then it's up to the nurse to ensure that she gets to keep her license by double checking what the doctor puts in and can't just do what the doctor says.
Oh, wow.
So that's the craziness there, but where the doctors are just go, well, we'll do this. And if they can, and they say they're prescribing a medication where it's supposed to be X number micrograms, and they may put it in as milligrams.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the thing, like, when you talk about, there's a certain thing going on right now. I'm not going to say the name of it just because I don't want to get my video taken down, but there's a thing going on that's getting mixed in with stuff that people are taking on the street. And you got to remember that stuff is ending a lot of things. It's causing a lot of havoc, and that's measured in micrograms.
Mm-hmm.
And there's 1 million micrograms per milligram. 1 million. And just a few micrograms in a milligram of something else can cause catastrophic damage.
Yep.
So that's crazy to think about, how small things like that can cause so much damage. And I know that's kind of confusing for people who may not know what I'm talking about, but there's a reason. But yeah. So it's just that idea that the pretentiousness of some in the profession, and people have said in the chat that when you're dealing with medications, you're dealing with pharmaceutical companies, you go, like, doctors go to conferences, and the conferences are sponsored by Kellogg and Coca-Cola, and then you go in, and I remember being upset when hospitals in the area took out regular soda. You could only get diet soda at our hospitals here locally. I don't even know if that's still the case. I know I'm in hospitals every once in a while, but I don't really pay attention to what's in the gift shops or whatever. I know I've got my grandma before, when she was in the hospital. She really liked Sprite, and she was, she was coming up on 90, so I'd get her whatever she wanted.
Right.
And I could get her regular Sprite, and that was fine. And they would have it. So I'm guessing that that's something they did away with, where you could get regular sodas now. It's the same thing. Like, my daughter works for an orthopedic surgery facility. You go in, they're serving French fries and all these things, and there's like zero actual healthy things unless you look at a salad. There was a video that we watched last night, and I'm going to probably do a kind of a reaction, because in the video, they are like, we're cutting out sugar for 30 days. Myself and my team, we're going to do this. Then we're watching it, and not once did they mention protein. They never even brought up meat, which is crazy. And they talked about, like,
yeah, that's right. That's crazy.
They're like, they were like, well, we're going to cut out all refined sugars, but they were still having, like, some bread. And I'm like, even though they mentioned in the video that bread gets turned to sugar, but they're like, well, we're going to have, like, maybe some whole grain bread. And there's just a weird disconnect. And I know that they follow a lot of the FDA and stuff in their videos.
Wow.
And because they've done other videos like this before. It's not that I don't think they're necessarily paid by the FDA by any stretch, but they follow, because they still got to go in that chain of information and not put out what's considered falsified information, because they're a huge channel, millions of subscribers to this channel. So I want to react. I just kind of want to do a reaction. I've not done something like that before. I'm kind of curious to do it to see how if I can make it work. My
Yeah.
editing skills, but and I'm looking at it and I'm like, because Shanda and I are sitting there watching it, and it's like they didn't mention meat. She's like, oh, I finally found something that I could have that's kind of sweet, that's kind of bridges, that's not sugar, and instead of like we can have dates, and I'm like, no, that sounds gross anyway. Dates sound hideous, and then I'm like, they're like, oh, I just want a salad, and I'm like, but they never ever mentioned. They even mentioned about like one of the girls doing the thing had gone into ketosis and was having like keto flu, and they're like, but they never mentioned like adding in electrolytes to try to help that. I mean, because just the knowledge is so fragmented here, and it's so crazy that this was what 5-6 years ago you had this incident happen, and even then they were like, hey, your diabetes is out of control. You need to cut out your sugar, your grains, and all this to get your stuff under control.
Yeah. Yeah, that. I think what it is, I feel like here in the US, and I think this is true even in Europe, like the UK and all, is there's so many fads all the time. And I think when people hear things like keto, carnivore, they're like, it's just another fad, right? And maybe a few people will hop on for a month or two. I mean, we've done trips where one time we had a waitress and we were like, okay, well, we don't want the bread or this. And she's like, oh, are you doing keto? And we were like, yeah. And she's like, oh, I did it for like 3 months to get my weight down for a wedding, but then I stopped. Like it's just, and so that a lot of people take it as it's just a fad. Oh, it's just for weight loss. That's why I try to get out there that, I mean, yeah, it does have benefits for weight loss, but really it's the health. Because in the end, when you're on your deathbed, are you going to be like, oh, at least I was skinny my whole life. Who cares? I was so sick, right? Or is it better to be like, I lived a healthy life. Maybe I wasn't the skinniest person in the world, but I felt good and I was healthy because I did keto. And I think if more people realize that, because that's the thing is, here everything's fads and it is so cyclical, and then people hear all different things from all different sources, because like when we had tried keto before, that's like what they were doing. We just were like, oh, so instead of having white bread, you have wheat bread. Instead of white rice, you're having brown rice, because then I'm being healthy. Because in case you actually go and do your own research, I don't think most people would understand. They're just like, oh, you cut out sugars. And so, as we know, sugar has like 500 different names. So they're looking for sugar. And they're like, oh, look, this doesn't have sugar. And people even, companies will even say sugar free, but the number one ingredient is maltitol. Well, you might as well just freaking have the real thing.
Well, I have a short out there that like it's just a quick short, and it's basically showing like the non-dairy creamers out there. It's like literally says 0 sugar on the front, and when you turn it over on the back, it's water and then corn syrup. Like, how can you? I know legally they're getting away with it because it's got a little asterisk, and it's like, a marginal amount. But it's like, how can you say marginal and then have 0 at the same time? That doesn't make any sense. And people are like, well, it's no sugar, okay. But that, and it's like 1 gram of carbohydrates per teaspoon or tablespoon or whatever the measurement is. And people are dumping a whole cup in their coffee, and that's 12, 13, 14 carbs right there in your coffee. And that's a significant amount of corn syrup at that point.
Yeah.
And that's why they do that, and that's why they play with the serving sizes. Either they're trying to get a carb count to look a specific way, or they're trying to get that magical 100 calorie mark per serving, or whatever the case is. And it's madness, pure madness.
And here we don't before keto, I didn't know what a serving was. I didn't look at a serving. If I looked at a label, I honestly, once I got with Heath had never dieted in his life. And so I took on that same mentality. I had dieted before. I was vegan at one point. And so if I looked and it said 100 calories, I was like, oh, it's 100 calories. I didn't look at the serving. I was like, oh, it's just 100 calories. And I'd throw in, a fourth of a cup of something that was actually would have been like 500 calories. But to me, I'm like, oh, it's just 100. So therefore, I'm doing better because we don't understand servings. And when I went keto, it was like, oh, that's what a tablespoon of mayo looks like. I would have never guessed because my tablespoon sure never looked like that tablespoon.
Yeah, it was funny because just the other day, Rachel and Joe put a video out about their whipped cream,
Yeah.
and Chandra gets the green container from Walmart. That's what she likes the best. And we were watching that video, and Chandra's like, "It's so rude of them to show us facts."
I know.
And she was like, "I don't like this video." Because she'll sit there and she'll fill her coffee cup up with it, and it's like you got to pick your battles too, but that kind of thing. And pre-keto, Chandra and I would go to the grocery store together, and our shopping cart would be, we would stock up on ramen noodle because we had 3 kids, and there's us, and we'd be like ramen noodles, Kraft mac and cheese, loads of margarine, gallons of milk, frozen pizzas, chicken thigh. Well, at least we would still get chicken thighs. That was about one thing that hasn't changed. We've never been chicken boob people. And so I was like, that kind of we would look at our cart, but then we would argue over cereal. Well, this cereal has too much sodium in it. Or, I don't want the wheat pasta. I want the regular pasta. And she's like, nope, wheat pasta is healthier. We're going to go, this cereal's lower in sodium, but but what they take out of sodium, they're probably going to pop up the sugar. And, we would argue about such the weirdest stuff. And so when we decided to go keto, we went to the grocery store probably 5 to 10 different times and went through the grocery store with a fine-tooth comb, looking at everything, its ingredients, looking at stuff that we were sold prior to as being healthy. We're like, raisins? That's gotta be low carb, right? Or quinoa, that's gonna be low carb, right? Or chickpeas or whatever, all the things that we're told are healthy, certain kinds of vegetables. And we're like, we had to figure out from the ground up what health was, what a carb was, what it really means, and then what the ingredients are. And we hadn't even got to the hidden sugars yet. So that's the crazy thing. And then we came home and we did a purge of the house as well, much to the chagrin of our teenagers. And I still feel bad about the fact that we gave away 10 pounds of margarine to somebody.
Wow. Yeah.
We should have thrown it in the garbage, but that mentality of we don't want to waste it. And we cleaned our pantry out, we cleaned it, and the kids were mad.
Oh.
What do you mean we're not going to have noodles anymore? Because noodles was a staple, whether it was Kraft mac and cheese, because there were 5 of us, and I would make, the huge pot of mac and cheese and, or frozen pizzas, or go to Taco Bell and bring home a huge bag of dollar burritos or whatever, because time and money and everything now, just how much we spend at Costco now is ridiculous.
Well, and I remember back in the day, again, not paying attention to servings, because to me, a regular box of mac and cheese, that was 1 serving. I would eat the whole box.
Like 2 boxes might be a serving too,
Right. Depending on what you really wanted. And I remember I would make that and I would eat the whole, sometimes I didn't even put it in a bowl. I would just eat it straight from the saucepan. Because I'm like, oh, this is good. And I'm like, what is it? Actually 4 servings?
4 servings, yeah.
What? But
did you know that a package of ramen is 2 servings?
What? No, there's no way.
Yeah.
Well, when I was vegan, because I did do vegan for almost a year and a half. And you know what? my goal then, I was trying to be healthy, but I lost weight. I lost 100 pounds being vegan because, it was probably mostly muscle mass. But that was really when I kind of started reading labels. But all I was looking for was any type of animal product. That's all I would, circle in. So, yeah, that was the first time I actually started using margarine. Before then, I'd always used butter. Then I started using margarine because I was vegan. Oh, now it's plant based. And yeah, and that's when I would look, but I would eat all kinds of stuff because I was always hungry. And then after that, thankfully, I stopped doing that because I never lost the craving for a steak. That was the one thing the whole time because, I hear people in that community and they're like, oh, yeah, I don't even miss that. And I was like, no, what? I still miss a steak. Like I craved a steak so much. And finally, one day I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to have a steak. And that was, and once I had that steak, I was like, okay, yeah, I don't care. At that point, I was like, I don't care if this is bad. I'm never giving up steak again in my life. And I've eaten steak ever since because I'm like, it just tasted so good. And so now, on keto, I was just kind of like, oh, wow, all the stuff that I had thought was healthy at one point, I'm learning was the exact opposite. Like we should be having butter, not margarine. We should be eating steak, not chickpeas, and it's just like, wow. And I feel so much better. Again, my ulcer, kind of circling back on that, 5 years, I have not had a flare up. Before, I was in the hospital several times a year. I had, I don't know, enough colonoscopies that I will gladly not have another colonoscopy the rest of my life because it was just so much, like all the time. And just hospitalized constantly, constantly. And did the doctor ever tell me? No, you know what? The only thing he said is because at one point I just got with Heath and I was having a flare up again. And he said, I said, well, my husband's been barbecuing a lot. I think that's probably good. He's like, smoked meats is the worst thing you could ever eat in your life. And I was like, oh, okay. And because I would notice that a lot of times with smoked meat, I would get indigestion. And I was like, oh, okay. And he's like, you just need to eat a lot of fiber and you will be fine. He said, other than that, he said, just make sure you're getting a lot of fiber. That's the only thing you could do, but avoid smoked meat. And I was
It's like
like, oh,
almost the worst advice he could give to you.
I think he was trying to keep a customer for life.
But I don't know if that's as cynical as I am. As cynical and as like bad as I think things are, I still don't think that the majority of people in healthcare are truly nefarious in the information they're providing. I think they think they're giving you the latest, greatest information. Typically, unfortunately, that means pharmaceuticals because they just don't have the nutrition knowledge to know. Because I had a friend on Facebook one day. She was talking about how this drug wasn't working for her anymore and the doctor didn't know what to do. And I was like, have you tried changing your diet? And she goes, I've worked in healthcare with doctors and nurses for umpteen years. There's no way food is going to make me feel better at all. And like yelling at me and chastising me about like, have you tried doing, and I've had other friends do the same thing to me. You're having migraines, you're having all these things. Have you tried doing this? Why would you even suggest that? So it's my friend with type 1 diabetes. I was, and she's in the hospital, DKA, sugar's 8, 900, 1,000. DKA, diabetic ketoacidosis. So for those of you who may not know what diabetic ketoacidosis is, would be if your sugars are high, 6, 7, 8, 900, 1,000, even higher, unfortunately, sometimes, and your ketones are also high. So 15, 16. So normally our range would be 0.5, 1.5 millimolar per deciliter. Theirs are 15. So 15, and then having sugars at 1,900, whatever. So that's what DKA is. And that's really bad. And so she's in the hospital with that kind of stuff. She's younger than me on dialysis and all this stuff. And I'm like, and I was like, just, have you, thought about cutting out the sugars? And, because I'll see that she's having these meals of pasta and macro, and mashed potatoes and all this stuff. And I'm like, that's why you can't, that's why it's not your doctor that can't keep your blood sugar at control. It's you.
Mm-hmm.
And her mom yelled at me on Facebook, and I'm like, it's unfortunate because there's no way for me to provide information. I know you should keep your nose out of it, but when you care about somebody, you're like, have you tried this? Not you have to do it, but have you tried this?
Right.
And it just almost every time backfires. And then I find on the same token, on the other side of the coin, I will have people who don't even acknowledge what I'm doing. And then months later, they'll send me a message. Hey, I've been following what you're doing. I've been doing it too. And I've lost this weight, or I've done this. I've got off this medication. Thank you so much for putting this information out there.
Yeah.
So
you have to be ready. You have to be open and ready to it. And unfortunately, there's some people that either have a defeatist, like, well, it's their identity. Well, I'm just a type 1. Well, I just have ulcerative colitis. This is just me. The doctors, I just have to deal with medicine the rest of my life. That's just how it is. And they don't want to do the work. That's what it comes down to. They don't want to do the work. They have to get in a place, and this is very similar to addicts. Like, you have to get at a point where it is so low, you are so miserable that you finally go, okay, let me see if there's something else I could do. And until they reach that point and make that decision themselves, there's nothing you can say or do, because that's them. That's their identity. And I mean, we tried to, say things. We've tried to let people know about it, but we get the same thing. They're just like, yeah, that's just BS. We had one friend where when he reversed his diabetes, he posted about it. And this person replied, you can never reverse diabetes. You might be in remission, but it's never reversed. You'll get it again.
I've heard the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, okay. And, had family members that are like, well, you better keep checking your blood sugar. Like, you need to check your blood sugar all the time because you might be a diabetic again. And it's like, okay, so this is what causes diabetes. Like, you have to understand it's, except for like type 1s, but generally a type 2, it's because you were eating the wrong thing. You were poisoning yourself. As long as you're not eating the poison anymore, you'll be fine. But no, that's how it is. And, we've had people that are like, no, that's just not how it works. And they just don't want to accept the fact that food is medicine. That's our number one nutrition is from food. And the number one way you can heal yourself and get better and take control of your health is with food. That's where it starts. Medicines, pills, all of that is there if you can't take control of it with the food. If that is something, things do happen that you need that extra help, but you should be starting first with food. That's where it should begin. Doctors should be, okay, let's see what you're eating. Let's see what we can improve on, because it's even coming out now that a lot of mental health could be helped with food. And I know so many people on my Facebook friends that have severe mental health issues. But yet then I see then there'll be, they'll have good days and they're like, oh, I'm having, this sugar like milkshake that has a donut and I don't know, something else attached to it. Like you're like, that's probably like a year's worth of sugar, carbs that I would have, and you're having in one drink. And they, then they're eating, ramen and mac and cheese and like almost devoid of protein. Like I hardly see a lot of protein. And of course cutting back on fat too, because can't have much fat, or if they
Most
are
of it is
having.
the fat going
Yeah.
so low fat that, and then that's the thing is like, what does cholesterol do? Cholesterol moves hormones through the body. And if you're going try to go low cholesterol, low fat, your body can't move the hormones and regulate its hormones, causing depression. And then the sugar aspect of it, that high
Mhm.
amount of sugar. And you did mention something, just to touch back on another thing, where there was, until I hit over 420 pounds, I knew I was probably, even though I was probably bigger at other points in my life, I had never stepped on a scale. But until I was trying to go through my hernia surgery and get a CPAP and all these things kind of all at once about 8-9 years ago,
Mm.
until I stepped on that scale, I wasn't ready. My identity was, I'm the guy that eats all this good food. If I want a big old huge whatever, I'm going to do it. We're going to go out to eat, and we're going to go to the buffet. I was just that guy.
Mhm.
And I had friends who'd be like, oh, you could eat so much. Oh yeah. You know what I mean? And that's not a good thing. And then there was one other thing that I wanted to touch on about that. But I can't think of it right now. So, um, that shortness of memory, I guess. But yeah, just the idea that what we eat is causing a bulk of our problems and we can't see it because we're so ingrained with pharmaceuticals, and there's a pill for that. And if the
Mhm.
doctor doesn't say it, then it's not true. How dare you tell me something and the doctor told me something else? And that's
Yeah.
the thing is like, that was one thing that I asked my friend with type 1 diabetes. I was like, has anything the doctor ever done for you helped? And they just got mad. And I mean, there's probably anger there because of their situation. And, it's just, you hate seeing your friends like that. The same thing
Yeah.
with my buddy with UC. I hate seeing that. I know he's never going to watch this, you know, but,
Well,
you know,
I think what it is we're so conditioned to quick things. I mean, that's why Amazon is so popular. Oh, I could get something tomorrow delivered to me. That's kind of how we approach everything. We need a quick fix. And really, when it comes to food, it's not going to be quick. It's going to take time. You're not, and some people get the keto flu. Thankfully, I don't think I ever did. And it takes time because your body has to detox from all those years of eating all those toxic foods. And we just don't realize it. And I try to kind of be now, instead of at the beginning, I would say, and I think this is common with anybody who first starts keto, and you're feeling so good, like you want to shout it to the rooftops, right? And let everybody know and tell everybody you should be doing keto. And people don't like that. So now I just try to be a silent pitcher. Like let my actions speak and not my words. And I'll do that. But yeah, it is sad because I'll see people, and they're just, having, to me, I'm not a fan of seed oils. And they're like, oh, look, I got this. And the number one ingredient, soybean oil. They're like, oh, it's so good. And they're just pounding down whatever that is. And then the sugars and all of this. And they're like, oh, yeah. Oh, I'm having such a bad mental day. And, I just can't stop crying, or I just feel so sad. And I'm just like, I mean, I'm not going to say it's the 100% answer, but I would think if you stop eating those things that are toxic for you, the things that cause your body inflammation, then maybe your body would be more apt to help handle the things that are going on in your brain to even out all those hormones, like you said, with the cholesterol and hormones. When it's working right, then maybe that can help all those other things. And what's the worst that can happen? So you try it for a few months. If it doesn't work for you, what are you out? And it's just hard to convince people to give that a try because they really just it's easier to have a pill and go on and eat all the stuff because like you see like what are all the crazy foods now, like what is Doritos has like some kind of crazy new flavor all the time, and what is it, Mountain
I
Dew
will
has
try
crazy.
those sometimes, you know what I mean? Like, over the summer, they had a hot mustard, and I couldn't get away from it. And I should have bought a small bag when I saw them at the gas station, and then the small bags disappeared. And then I was in Wisconsin over 4th of July, and I bought a big bag because I had to try those. I just had to. Was it I mean, I don't regret it. I mean, I had one bag. Well, I shouldn't have had the whole bag, but I did. Do I regret it? No, they were delicious. But I've been pestering Porking Good Pork Rinds to come out with a hot mustard flavor.
Yes, I saw that.
So I've been bothering them, and they were like, "Do you want to be an affiliate?" And I was like, "Okay." So that kind of
Yeah.
worked out for that. But I just been like, "Are you gonna make some?" So I need to send them a message again soon. But like, "Hey, I'm just waiting on these hot mustard ones." But
Yes, that would be
the,
amazing.
the other thing that I thought of is what you were talking about with the smoked meats. So something that Shander and I have found is that we can't tolerate overcooked or well done meat. So that's a
Mhm.
lot of barbecue. Now,
Mhm.
chicken, obviously, chicken you're gonna cook thoroughly, but that doesn't seem to bother us as much. But like we've noticed that a lot of pork will bother us now, like pork chops, and it could be the way that the
Mm.
pork is raised as well, because even now bacon and pork belly seem to give her indigestion as well. So we don't
Mm.
know like how much of that is what, because it's difficult to get like farm raised pork belly without paying $100 or whatever, right? And that's a lot. And we
Yeah.
found that with beef, we're eating a lot more. Like she was always, a medium well, and now she's not quite as rare as me. But if I do cook, like, so even now with like her lunches, when I make beef for her, I will undercook her beef because she's then going to go and put it in the microwave.
Mhm.
So, and that helps cut down. We just don't have the issues. The diet. Because if I eat too, like we used to make big like roasts in the crock pot, and we would make pork tenderloins. Tie them up and put them in the oven and cover them with onions and stuff. And then was like, we would eat that, then we'd get heartburn.
Mm.
And it's not really the onion because I eat onions with my burgers, and that doesn't bother me. So it's got to be the pork, and
Mm.
and over and or even with like beef roast, if we would overdo it and you shred it, and you're having beef roast in the crock pot, it cooks for 12 hours. It's
Yeah.
very overdone, and then that just would just sit and sit
Oh.
and sit in our stomachs and give us indigestion, heartburn. So we just don't anymore. So I don't know. I mean, that means that does limit our amount of barbecue that we eat. And I mean, I have a smoker, but that's more just to cook burgers on and stuff, or chicken
Mhm.
legs or chicken thighs or whatever. But
Hmm.
yeah, so I don't
I
know.
I always thought mine was ulcer colitis related because, like, we would go to different barbecue joints, and for a while, I thought it was the mesquite wood because that's popular down here is to cook with mesquite, and I would just have the worst indigestion. Like, it would not go away until I took it out. I would have to expel it to feel better. But I've noticed since going keto, that's gone away. Like I can eat wood or food that's been smoked with mesquite now, and I don't get that indigestion anymore. So I think part of it was the sugars, the maybe seed oils, because there is one barbecue joint here, and anytime we've gotten it, I still get sick. And we figured out they must either coat it or inject it with like canola or soybean oil. And because anytime, and I'll know anytime we've gone somewhere and they use soybean or canola oil, I get really sick within an hour. And so that's one reason it's not worth going out to eat. That just does not do well with my body. But now that I've been keto and avoiding those, I feel so much better. Like I just don't get the indigestion like I used to because it was bad. Like I used to have to keep Pepto Bismol by my bed because I would literally be drinking it just straight out of the bottle. Like, I wasn't going to measure that stuff. I just drink it till I felt better. And that was while I had, all the ulcerative colitis stuff. But now that's gone away. But I also feel like part of it is to do with gut health. And so that's really been my mission the last almost a year, like 8 months now, is to try to get my gut as healthy as possible. And so one of the things I've done is started really incorporating more fermented foods in my keto lifestyle. And I have found that has helped me dramatically with things. It's just because I've always had gut issues. Even as a child, I had severe gut issues. And so now, and even at the beginning with keto, I still had gut issues. I still had gut issues. It was even worse when I was carnivore. Sorry for everybody who's carnivore who loves it. That's great for you. Carnivore did not work for me. I had the worst gut issues when I was carnivore. It was just horrible. But now adding in a lot of good probiotics and prebiotics and polyphenols, I'm seeing a huge difference doing that.
I've been meaning to pick. We tried kimchi.
Mm.
Jason mentioned kimchi in the chat, but we tried kimchi early on in keto, and it wasn't bad. I need to buy another thing of it and see how we feel about it now, because our taste buds have changed so much. Keto has changed so much since we started.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how we look at things has changed so much in the last 8-9 years. I mean, when we started keto, it was a moderate protein, high fat. Now it's more of a high protein, high fat. Some people look at more high protein, moderate fat. But,
Yeah, and that's the thing too. I feel like a lot of people who are new to keto, they think there's only one way to do it. And it's really, you have to figure out what works for you. Like for me, again, the carnivore did not work for me. A lot of people, it works great, and that's awesome for them. I gained everything I lost on keto, I gained back on carnivore, which was very sad. And then for some people, doing the high protein works great for them. For me, that is a no-go. I can't do that high protein. Like somebody, a lot of people like to say aim for 150. If I got 150 grams of protein in a day, I'd be putting on weight every single day. It just doesn't work. And I would feel miserable. I shoot for around 80 to 100 grams. That's my sweet spot. My body still responds very well to high fat, moderate protein. And I think that's why I did so well on keto when I first started, because I was doing the traditional keto, the high fat, moderate protein. So sometimes when people are new to keto, especially now, since, in the last 5 years, there's so many variations now, and they try something like, oh, it didn't work for me. It's like, well, there's so many different ways to do keto. Like, and if you're doing keto and you feel like it's not working, and it's been a while, several months, I'm not saying, one bad week or 2 bad weeks, you change everything. But if you've been sticking to consistency for several months and things just aren't working, then try a different version and see what works for you, because everybody is going to figure out what works for your body, what your body needs. Is your body going to respond well to the higher protein or the higher fat? Do you need to add in your probiotics and prebiotics to that? I mean, personally, I think everybody should have some probiotics and prebiotics. I just feel like that's ultimately what we need. I mean, as far as what I've searched, is that every culture has some type of fermented food. And to me, if every culture has something like that, I think that means we're supposed to have it. That to me, that's like ancestral appropriate. And that's what we kind of go for. That's my thoughts. And that's basically like when I do the ward report every week, that's what I share is, hey, this is what's going on with me. This is how I'm doing with the probiotics. And I rant about things, and I'm sure there are people who disagree with me, and that's fine. We don't have to agree.
Well, I think we should all agree that we're all different. And like,
Mhm.
like for me, when we started, I adapted very quickly. Chandra, it took her 6 months to adapt. And it was a struggle bus 6 months. It was hard fought 6 months.
Mm,
She'd be like, I just don't think I can do this. And she kept going and going because she knew that if she stopped, I would too.
yeah. Yeah.
And that's the last thing that she wanted. So she fought for 6 months and then finally it clicked. And then she's been doing it ever since, but she's still not really lost any weight. Um, even after 8 years.
Mm,
But she's got all the other benefits, like doesn't get drowsy at work. She can go 12 hours, and even if she doesn't get a meal, she's okay. Like yesterday at work, she didn't even get a lunch. And she was
wow.
there till like she gets there at like before 7 in the morning, and she didn't call me. She was heading home until like after 8 o'clock at night.
Wow.
So, and then when she got home, I had made pork belly, and she ate a bunch of that. And then she was
Mhm.
miserable because we'll still make
Oh,
it. We'll still make it because it's so good. But then, like, she's like, I have heartburn, and it sits right here, and it won't go anywhere.
that
So,
sucks. Because poor Billy is just, it's the
well, I make it
candy
all
of this
crispy,
world.
like too. So
Huh?
I made it all crispy.
Oh, well, yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
See, I like it really crispy. Heath likes it kind of spongy. But so when I do mine, I like to get it real crispy. But I also like cracklings more, and he likes more like pork rinds.
She
So
likes
I'm,
the spicy cracklings too, but
oh, so
you know,
good. I know. We need to hang out. I want to hang out with Chandra. That'd be
yeah,
fun.
getting her to hang out with people is difficult.
Well, yeah, I'm working
I mean,
that
it just
much.
doesn't
I
quite
mean,
work out. Like we were supposed to go out. We were supposed to go to my aunt's house for dinner last night, and I didn't put it in the calendar correctly, so it didn't populate in her side. So she had picked up work, and then
oh,
it snowed anyway. So my aunt canceled dinner last night, so we didn't go to dinner at my aunt's house last night. And well, I was going to go. Chandra had to work, and then it ended up being a lot of snow because she called and canceled at like noon, 12:30 our time, and it had just started snowing. And I was taking the girl to school, and it wasn't bad. I was like, oh, this isn't bad. Then like when I go to pick her up, it's a whole different ball game.
oh gosh, that's
So
awful.
yeah, so we got about I don't know 3, 4, maybe 6 inches in some spots.
Oh
So,
my
but we
gosh.
had days at like 65 and sunny, 70 degrees. So I knew like when we were doing stuff and it was sunny out and it was warm and you didn't necessarily need a hoodie, like it's gonna come back to bite us in a couple of weeks because we got it because Indiana you got to get a certain amount of winter in or it doesn't turn.
Oh, wow. Oh goodness. I keep looking ahead. And I'm just like always, as we had a really bad storm a few years ago in February. So I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, if we make it past February, I know we're good. So I think we're good because I mean it's already, what is today? The 17th. I don't even know what day it is. But I think we'll be good. But it is cooler today. I think it was like 48 when I woke up. So I'm like, ooh, it's chilly. And you've got 6 inches of snow.
It was in the 20s.
Oh gosh. No.
But I
I
mean, it's
just
Indiana where people complain every year. Oh, I'm like, you live in Indiana.
right. Like this happens every year.
It's like now we're gonna have pothole season. So
Oh, oh gosh. Oh
yeah,
my
but
goodness.
we made sure we have all like so we have a lease and our daughter has a lease and like we make sure that we get the tire and rim insurance so we don't have to worry like so if a tire or rim gets all messed up because of potholes, we just take care of it and get a new one.
Oh
Yeah,
wow. Oh my gosh.
I mean,
Now
because
what
some of
do you
these
think?
potholes will eat half your car.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, they're
Well,
pretty bad. Yeah.
are you planning on staying in Indiana forever or are you thinking of moving?
I mean, as long as all of we're not going to go anywhere unless our kids are all there.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I mean, we talked about like Chandra's talked about doing travel nursing.
Yeah.
It's like 13-week contracts, and you can go like if you have to go at least 50 miles or whatever from home to get for it to be considered travel.
Yeah.
And then there's it's like depending on like the time and how in demand travel nurses are, they could pay like 100+ an hour,
Yeah.
and
That's
then
good
like they
money.
pay your expenses or whatever.
Yeah. But then
So
that's a
we've
long
like talked
time.
about like with me the way I am, if I could just we could just pack up and go somewhere for 13 weeks, go
Yeah.
live in like Alabama or Florida but the kids couldn't. They would have to come visit us once while we're there, maybe, when they couldn't afford to do that every 13 weeks. So it was
Mhm.
just, so that's why she does the weekend option now, because it pays well. But she now works every Saturday, Sunday, and picks up either
Aw.
Mondays or Fridays because they pay a bonus for that too.
Oh, nice. Nice. That's good. Yeah, she's definitely got a good career with nursing. You can definitely earn really well. Mm. Yeah, because I looked at that at one point, but uh, I'm glad overall I decided because I was always like, I loved science and then I loved math. It was like an even for me. Like, which do I love more? And I really wished gotten into math. I think I would have gotten further if I just stuck with math in college and got like a finance degree. I would have done so much better. But I like the aspect of helping people. That's why I liked medicine so much, because I was like, oh, I can help somebody. I was even thinking of doing like the where you I forget what it's called, where you go like overseas and help and everything with your medical degree. But yeah, you could do a lot.
Doctors
I wish,
Without Borders and stuff.
yes, but oh, that would be nice if now. I don't know. Are all your kids grown
Yeah,
now?
yeah,
Okay, okay.
yeah. Our,
Because
young,
you,
our youngest turns 20 in March.
wow. Well,
So they're 25, 24, and 19 right now.
wow. Well,
And then the granddaughter's 5.
that's the hard part. Is the granddaughter.
Well, we have her every day,
Well, I
Monday through
know, but I'm
Friday.
saying
Yeah.
that's what would make it the hardest to
Oh
travel.
yeah, moving away from her, I can't even like
No,
we.
you
Well,
couldn't.
I mean, even still, like I'll drop her off at school, and I'll have that 10 minutes where I'm like, and then I'm ready to go get her.
Aw. Yeah, that would be the hardest part about moving or doing a traveling nurse is 13 weeks without seeing her. That would be too
Oh
much.
no, we'd have to fly back or something in the middle of it or whatever.
Right, right. Oh, goodness.
Because when she had her regular nursing schedule, she could do, because nurses usually do 312s, and you
Mhm.
could set it up to where, say, you could butt them up next to each other where you had like 6 days together, and then you didn't have,
Mm.
then you would put the other days at the other end of it, so you would have like 9 days off or whatever.
Mhm.
And now
Yeah.
if she does it, but she only gets 4 vacation days a year,
Oh, gosh.
but she only works 2 days a week.
Oh,
So
okay,
two
okay.
vacation days means she's got 2 weeks off.
Wow,
So
that's
that's how, like, when we
nice.
went, yeah. So when we went to Florida, we left after she got off work. So we left at like 11 or 12 at night.
Mm,
It still took us a while to get into Florida the next day because we stopped and stopped and stopped and stopped, all the way down. And then
mhm,
we didn't come back home until like the following like Thursday.
mm.
So we were
Wow,
there
that's
for about
nice.
almost 2 weeks. So that was nice.
Yeah, that is really nice. Oh, wow. Mm. So do you have what all are you doing next weekend? You're going to the Keto Ohio meetup?
That's not till March 16th.
Well, what's next? I thought there was something next Saturday.
There is one in Cincinnati, but I can't go to both.
Oh. Oh,
And I had
okay.
already made plans to go to the Columbus one.
Mm,
So I mean, just money wise, I just can't afford to go to both because
right.
it's like It's like that one's like a 2-hour drive. The Columbus one's like 3-hour drive for me.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then we are working on, and I don't know what's going on. So we have initially a May 18th meetup planned for Indy, for like we've done 2 before.
Yeah, for
But
Jackie.
those who have been following Joe and Rachel, they have to come into Elkhart, Indiana sometime in April. So we're
Oh.
trying to see, maybe we might move our meetup into April if the stars align and have Joe and Rachel there.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
It just depends on when they need to pick up their trailer and all that stuff, because they're picking up a new camper.
Oh,
They're having
nice.
it built or whatever. So it depends on how that plays out, if that will work. So it's either going to be sometime in April or it'll be in May. But that's what I mean. It's still not up on lowcarbevents.com yet, but
Right.
so,
What other
yeah.
events are you going to this year?
I've got my KPL ticket already.
Yay.
So
That's
KPL for
awesome.
sure. I mean, that's only a
Awesome.
2-hour drive for me.
Oh, that's so nice.
Yeah, so Indy to Louisville is a short drive, and when I'm staying, I'll be there Thursday through Sunday. And I may be going to Low Carb for Better Health. I did have Amanda on last week, so.
Oh, nice.
But
Wow.
that's up in the air. That's another expense, an
Yeah,
Airbnb and all that stuff.
I know. I
So.
know. That's the main thing. Like when I look at KPL, it's so much fun, but it is like 14 to 16-hour drive for us. And then, yeah, so the driving, we're usually going to get one hotel on the way there and then on the way back and then staying at a place while you're there and then the dogs. And I was just like, no, not this year. How about the cruise? Do y'all ever think you'll do the low carb cruise?
I doubt it, to be honest with you. There
Uh-huh.
was a glimmer. So after KPL, one of the photographers had reached out to me and said that was offered the photography position or a job doing photography on the low carb cruise this May or whatever it was, May, June, end of May
Mm-hmm.
and beginning of June. And he had he would have basically a +1, and he offered me to go because his wife couldn't go. And I was like,
Wow.
okay. But that obviously that didn't work out. So, but I almost was going to go on that. But a free cruise would have still cost me probably about $1,000
Oh, yeah.
travel and all that stuff. So, but yeah, I don't know, because Chandra's not too keen on going on cruises. Like the only way we'll probably get her on a cruise is if our daughter books and decides to take our granddaughter on a Disney cruise.
That would be fun.
And then
Yeah.
Chandra, because wherever the kids go, she goes.
Aw.
So
Yeah,
we'll
that
see. I just want to go. I want to go to Castaway Key, where you can only go there if you go. That's one of the Disney properties. You can
mhm.
only go there if you're on a Disney cruise. You can't just stop by.
Right.
So
Oh, that would be so
other than
much
that,
fun.
I want to go on the Alaska cruise, but it's so expensive and everything's already being planned now. And
Yeah.
like money, so like that's like what, probably 2 of us, like $5,000 with
Oh,
travel and the
easily.
cruise. It's that's not
Easily.
in our budget. I mean, we just spent like $10,000 at Disney.
Ugh. Well, I would say easily Alaska, you could easily get to 10 because not only the cruise price and the airfare, but then you're going to want to take excursions and all of the excursions are pricey. So yeah, you'll easily get up there. And then of course, since you're there, like how often do you get to go to Alaska? You're going to be buying all kinds of souvenirs. So yeah, I always plan on Alaska costing 5 to 10K because yeah, you're going to want to do those really nice excursions. And the excursions are easily $100 per person, easily. And that's for a base excursion. So yeah, it's just really pricey, but it'll be fun. I'm excited for everyone. I wish we could do it, but it's just no. That's a
Things would
lot of
have to
money.
drastically change with our income for us to be able to do that kind
Yes,
of stuff. Like, you know,
exactly.
I need
Yeah.
to make more than $1.50 a day from YouTube, and
You get $1.50. Look at you, high roller.
I know, right?
I mean, I'm excited. We made $1 a day.
Well, I mean, it's roughly that. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, I
I
know. Yeah,
mean,
because I was listening to someone else and she said she broke down and she's got like 40,000 subscribers. She said she broke it down. She maybe makes $1.20 an hour when she figures out, editing and everything. She's like, yeah, I'm making $1.20. That's about what I make. And she's like, so no, this isn't full time.
well, I think a lot of that you start to have to leverage, and I've talked about this before. Like people get upset with seeing like the Element ads and like when the creators are doing their Element spots. People get
Mhm.
upset with that because they see them over and over again, but that could like an Element sponsored video is like a paycheck.
Yeah.
That's not that could be anywhere between I've heard differing numbers depending on size of channel, reach, and there's obviously if they want to continue to work with you, you have to still be selling the product for them. So you basically got to have some sell through and some return on their investment, but anywhere from like $400 to $1,200 per video. And they may do 4 videos for you in a month or sponsor 4 videos. So, I mean, that's
Mhm.
the thing is I try to explain, like, as a creator and as someone who's trying to build a community and spend as much time doing this as we can, there's a lot of cost that never gets recouped doing this. And I mean, obviously, we're not doing it for that. If we were doing it for that, we wouldn't be doing it at all. But at least like to have some kind of light at the end of the tunnel. Like, we may, there's still things I'd love to buy new cameras
Yeah.
and I got a new laptop last or 2 years ago, and I'll probably need one in 2 years, like things
Right.
like, upgrading equipment and stuff. And that
Mhm.
all that costs money. And, you know, so
Well,
I'm always transparent about that. So
yeah, and we try to be as well. And what I was interesting to me, and I know this is probably really boring for everybody else, but I was listening to another channel and she said in their community that a lot of them will share like that. I guess they have like a lot of the people like have, I guess, like a Facebook Messenger group chat. And she said they will share or email when they get a sponsor. They'll be like, hey, this company pays about X amount. So here's their contact information because she's like, we're all about, if you're in this community, hey, let's all try to help each other with these sponsors and try to all get on that so that we're all, trying to get that as well because that's really how you make it is with sponsors. That's how you
right.
can make it profitable. And
Until you're
it's
getting millions of views, YouTube isn't going to pay you anything. I mean,
right,
that's millions
right.
of views a month. I
Yeah.
mean, there's creators who get millions of views a day. I haven't even had a million views since I've started. I'm at like just under 500,000 views for my channel, which is still that's ridiculous accomplishment even for me. But I'm coming up on 600 videos.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's so much time put into it, but I thought that was a good idea, like, because I never think of, like, the sponsors and stuff, and I'm just thinking, like, I don't even know of a whole lot of sponsors within the keto community, like you said, like Element,
Element, but they
um,
won't really even contact you until you're over 10,000 subscribers.
uh,
They used
that
to
makes
work with
sense.
smaller company. They used to work with smaller channels, but I'm guessing they didn't see a return on their investment. So now they focus
Mhm.
on the
The big
larger channels.
ones.
That's why you're seeing it with, I think anybody you're seeing it on has more than 10,000 subscribers. So,
Uh,
100,000, 50,000, 40,000. So,
wow. Yeah, it's interesting. But to us, I mean, we both enjoy our jobs, so we do this really, and I'll let Heath share the main reason is really for Heath. And
mhm.
it's a good outlet for us to, share our story, share our passion because we do love to cook. Like that's our thing. Like that's my zen is cooking and creating recipes and everything. And so we just share that because that's what we enjoy doing. And then we, share whatever knowledge we have. I try to, when I learn something new, I try to share it, and maybe it'll help you, maybe it won't. Maybe you disagree, maybe you like it. It doesn't matter. We're just here to share it. And then, Heath sharing, it's so important with his multiple sclerosis. So him, sharing that information because, and he'll say this, going back earlier, a lot of, I guess, diseases or diagnoses, the doctors never say that diet or food has anything to do with it. And that was the same thing with his multiple sclerosis. There was no doctor who told him he could treat it with food, that food would have any impact on it. So it's good to get that out. And he'll share it more tonight at
Right.
6:30
So
Central.
everybody, 7:30 Eastern, I'll be talking with Heath. And and Jason's right. YouTube is primarily to help first. I mean, that's my primary goal. But,
Yeah.
hopefully someday it becomes, self-sufficient. And that's really, that's all I really want out of it, is to be able to help people and it to pay for itself.
Yes.
Hopefully one day. But, and
Right.
I've got wonderful members. And so I try to, make sure that they get the recognition they deserve. And I try to
Exactly.
I have a banner to put up for them so everybody knows. But,
That's awesome.
but yeah, I think it's just one of those things. I'm here to talk to people like you, interact, because we've never actually really even had a chance to speak face to face like this before. We've
I
only
know.
talked in your chats and such before.
I
So
know.
this is a treat for me anyway.
Aw.
So yeah, I mean, you're going to get a double feature today. So Heath will be later tonight. So I'll get some other stuff done today and then we'll talk again. But I just wanted to say thank you so very much. Is there anything that you wanted to touch on before we go? Anything you want to plug? Anything you've got going on?
Well, I just did the shameless plug for Heath.
Yeah.
No, please join our channel. I know most everyone here is already a subscriber, so we'd welcome you over at our channel. I put out my warden report every Wednesday, and it's just basically me ranting. So if you like that type of content, go give that a follow. And then every Friday night we go live at 6:30 Central. We'll cook up an entree or maybe a snack, and you watch us cook, and then we chit chat and chew the fat with everyone. And that's really the highlight of my week is Friday nights, because how can it get any better? Eating and getting to chat with all of you, it's like the best. And thank you so much, Dustin.
Thank you, Jason.
Oh, that's so awesome. Wow,
Jason
that's
just
great.
gifted 5 memberships. So those who get
Wow,
the memberships, be on the lookout for those. Thanks, Jason. That means so very much to me.
that's so cool. Jason's so amazing.
Jason is I got a chance to have dinner with him and his wife right before KPL last year.
Aw.
So
And
they
he's going to
drove
be there
down.
again this year, I saw.
Yes, and I'm excited for
That's
that. It
so
was
cool.
nice because they were able to drive down. We had dinner Thursday night and then Keto Palooza the following day. And I got a chance to take them to our local pizza place that serves keto pizza and keto breadsticks, and they have a salad bar and soups. They usually have, depending on the day, they'll have 2 to 3 soups, and usually at least one of them will be a keto soup. Sometimes 2 keto soups, and then they have like keto desserts and stuff too. So, I mean, it's really saved their business too.
And that's that Rockstar? Is that what it's called?
Rockstar Pizza,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm super jelly. Oh my gosh, we would probably be there all the time because the pizza is like his love. So, oh my gosh.
That's
Well,
one of our big like off-plan meals too. Sometimes it's hard to get away from pizza, whether it's
I,
keto pizza, regular pizza. I make like crustless pizzas at home. Like just that pizza flavor is so hard to get away from.
it is. That is like the best. We love it so much.
Yeah, I've had dinner. We've gone to dinner with Maitreya.
Oh,
She's been there. We've gone to dinner with Mike and Dawn, and
wow.
And
Oh,
obviously,
that's
like Jackie lives
beautiful.
here, and Jennifer
Yeah.
Lucas lives here, and I'm trying to think. We've gone with other people. I can't remember. I can't think off the top of my head who else has been there. Oh, Cindy and her husband have been there with us.
Wow. Goodness. I want to, we'll have to get to Indiana eventually and get to go there and hang out with everyone. That'd be so much fun. Oh,
Thank
that's
you so
awesome,
very
Sean.
much.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dustin. This has been fun. I was very nervous, but thank you.
There's no reason
And
to be nervous.
well, I was like, oh, I hope I'm awake enough to even make a coherent sentence, but
I'm a big dork. It's fine.
but thank you so very much for having me on. It means a world to me. I'm just so excited. This was so much fun. And just that you even thought about having us on here, I just feel so honored that you even considered us. So thank you.
You did wonderful. I had a lot of fun.
Oh,
And thank
yeah.
you so much to everybody in the chat. Thank you to the new members. Thank you again, Jason, for gifting those 5 memberships. It means the
Yeah.
absolute world to me. And we'll see you later tonight for Mr. Heath, if I can find my mouse. And we'll see you later tonight, everybody.
Bye.